The desert stretched wide and endless, a sea of burning sand under the weight of a fading sun. The lone human rider sat on his horse, shoulders heavy, lips cracked, eyes tired. He had been riding for days, chasing a road that seemed to vanish every time he thought it was near. His horse was all he had left, his partner, his hope, his only chance to live. He whispered to the animal, his voice dry like dust. "Easy, girl, just a little further." The horse snorted, weak but loyal, carrying the man across the dunes. He had no food left, no water, nothing but the will to keep walking. The desert had taken everything else, but he was not ready to give up yet. Then he saw it, a dark shape lying half buried in the sand. At first he thought it was another dead traveler, just another victim of the desert's cruelty. But as he rode closer, the shape moved ever so slightly. It was not human. The body was small, fragile, and strange. Silver hair glistened faintly in the dying light, and her skin carried a soft glow. Her chest rose and fell weakly, each breath like a fight. The man stopped, staring in silence. He knew she was alien, not of his kind, not of his world. Her arms were thin, her legs trembling as if she had crawled until she could crawl no more. Her eyes opened slowly, glowing faint blue, and for a moment she looked at him, not with fear, but with something deeper, pleading, desperate, clinging to life. The rider's heart pounded, his mouth dry. He looked at his horse, then at her, then back at the endless desert. He had only one horse left, and without it, he would surely die. If he gave it to her, he had nothing but his own 2 feet. The desert would swallow him before another dawn, but if he left her here, she would die before nightfall. It was a cruel choice, one that no man should ever face. He dismounted slowly, his boots sinking into the soft sand. The horse, too, reined its head as if asking what he was doing. The man knelt beside the alien girl, brushing sand from her face. Her skin was hot, burning, her body trembling with weakness. She tried to speak, but her words came broken, pieces of a language he did not know. Still, the tone was clear. It was a cry for help. The man closed his eyes, his chest heavy with the weight of choice. He thought of his long journey, of survival, of how far he had come. Then he looked at her again, this stranger from another world. She was young, too young to be left to die alone in the dust. Something stirred in him, something stronger than fear of death. He could not walk away, not from her. With shaking hands, he untied the reins from his saddle. The horse stomped weakly, sensing what was about to happen. "Forgive me, girl," the man whispered to his horse. "Live if I don't," he added softly, pushing the reins toward the alien girl. She blinked, confused, her glowing eyes wide. The man lifted her gently, placing her across the horse's back. The animal staggered under the weight but did not fall. The alien girl's hands clung weakly to the reins, her chest rising with new breath. The man stepped back, the sand cold against his boots. He had given away his last hope of survival. The desert stretched before him like a grave, yet he felt no regret. The girl looked down at him, her lips moving, forming strange sounds. Then, broken but clear, one word came out: "Why?" The man gave a faint smile, though his throat ached with thirst. "Because you're alive," he whispered, his voice rough but steady. "Someone has to live." The desert wind blew hard, carrying his words into the endless horizon. The alien girl stared at him with glowing eyes, a silent promise hidden in her gaze. The horse began to move slowly, carrying her forward. The man followed on foot, stumbling with each step, his body weak, his brow heavy, but his heart strangely strong. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the land. In the distance, unseen by him, faint figures stirred against the glow of the horizon. Tall, silent shapes, watching, waiting. The man walked on, unaware of what dawn would bring. But the choice was already made, and his fate already tied. The desert had taken much, but tonight, it gave him a secret he did not yet understand. The desert night fell fast, the sun's fire sinking behind the dunes, leaving the land in silver shadow. The air turned cold, sharp and cruel, cutting into the man's skin as he walked. Beside him, his last horse carried the fragile alien girl, her small body trembling against the saddle. Her faint glow lit the path like a weak lantern, soft blue against the endless dark. The man staggered, each step heavy, sand dragging at his boots. His throat was raw, every breath like swallowing dust. But he kept moving. He could hear the girl's weak breaths, shallow but steady, as if she was clinging to life only by will. Sometimes she leaned forward, clutching the horse's mane with shaking hands. Sometimes she leaned sideways, almost falling, and the man rushed to steady her. Each time he caught her, her glowing eyes met his, silent but full of something strange, something that bound him to her. The wind grew louder, carrying with it sounds that did not belong. Not the cry of birds, not the whisper of sand, but low growls circling in the dark. The man froze, his heart pounding, his hand gripping the old knife at his belt. The horse stamped nervously, ears twitching, the girl's eyes widening with faint fear. Shadows moved across the dunes, crawling low, slinking closer. The man squinted, trying to see. Were they desert beasts or something worse? The girl whispered in her broken tongue, words he could not understand, but her tone was clear. Warning, danger, fear. Her thin hand lifted, pointing into T. He dark where eyes glowed faintly, yellow and sharp. The man swallowed hard, standing firm though his legs trembled. I won't let them take you, he muttered, the knife shaking in his grip. The creatures did not strike, not yet, only circled like shadows of death. The girl pressed herself low against the horse, her breathing quick. The man took slow steps forward, shielding her with his own body. The beast growled once more, then vanished into the dunes, swallowed by night. The silence that followed was worse, for he knew they were still there, still waiting. Hours passed, the night dragging on like a curse. The man grew weaker with every step, his body screaming for rest. But he did not stop, not while she still breathed. Her faint glow was the only thing keeping the darkness from swallowing him whole. Sometimes she whispered to him, strange words that sounded like songs. He did not understand, but the sound eased his heart, like a promise that he was not walking alone. The cold deepened, so sharp it bit into his bones. His horse staggered, legs trembling, the girl clutching tight to stay on. The man pressed his hands against the horse's side, whispering comfort. Just a little longer, girl, just a little longer. The alien child looked at him, her lips moving, and this time a word came in broken human tongue. Cold, she whispered, voice weak as the wind. The man nodded, though his teeth chattered. He pulled off his own coat, thin and torn, wrapping it around her small body. She blinked at him, surprised, her glowing eyes softening. He was freezing now, but he did not care. Better he suffer than she. The desert seemed endless, dunes rising and falling like waves. But far ahead, faint lights flickered on the horizon. The man's heart skipped. Was it a mirage, or a settlement, or something else? He forced his legs to move faster, even as his body cried out in pain. The girl stirred at the sight, whispering in her own tongue, her voice filled with hope. But as they neared, the lights vanished, swallowed by shadow. The man's chest sank. It had only been the glow of strange desert plants, nothing more. Hope, once bright, fell heavy. Still, he did not stop, his steps dragging but determined. Every time he stumbled, the girl reached out, her small hand brushing his shoulder. It was weak, but it steadied him, as if her will pushed him forward. Their bond, though unspoken, grew with each step. Two lives tied together by chance, by choice, by something greater than either understood. But the night was not done with them. From the dunes, more shadows rose, silent and tall. Not crawling beasts this time, but figures. They did not move like animals, nor sound like them. They stood still and watching, eyes glowing faint against the stars. The man froze, his breath caught in his throat. The alien girl stiffened on the horse, her glow brightening in sudden fear. She whispered one word, barely audible. Sisters. The figures did not move, only stood like statues in the sand. The man's knife trembled in his hand, unsure if they were enemy or savior. The horse stamped, restless, the girl clutching tighter. The night air grew heavy, silence pressing down like a weight. The man took a step forward, his body ready to break, but his spirit burning. The figures only watched, silent, patient, as if waiting for dawn to reveal their purpose. The man lifted his eyes to the horizon. The first pale line of morning light was beginning to glow, and he knew that whatever those figures were, the next sunrise would change everything. For better or for worse, his fate was no longer his own, and hers was no longer hers. The desert was quiet, too quiet. The man's breath came in short, sharp gasps as he leaned on the horse's side, his body close to breaking. Beside him, the alien girl sat weakly on the saddle, her glowing eyes half closed, her small hands gripping the reins as if they were her lifeline. And in the distance, those tall, silent figures stood against the dunes, watching, waiting, their eyes faint and cold in the starlight. The man did not move closer, his knife still in his hand, though his grip was shaking. The horse shifted nervously, stamping the sand, its nostrils flaring in fear. The girl whispered something, her alien tongue soft and broken, and though the man could not understand, the tone was clear. It was fear mixed with recognition. Her head lowered, her body pressed against the horse, as if she wanted to hide. The man forced his body to move. One step, then another, the sand dragging at his boots like chains. He whispered under his breath, voice raw, "Stay calm, girl. Stay with me." The figures did not advance, did not attack. They only stood there, silent as the desert itself. The man's heart pounded, sweat freezing against his skin. Were these shadows friend or enemy, or something beyond both? Time stretched, the night crawling toward dawn. The man's legs trembled with weakness, his vision blurring. He dropped to one knee, gasping, his knife falling into the sand. The alien girl gave a weak cry, sliding halfway from the saddle to cling to him. Her small hands touched his face, her eyes glowing brighter, desperate. She whispered a single word, broken but clear. "Live." The man smiled faintly, though his lips were cracked. "I'll try," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper in the cold. The sky began to change then, the stars fading as Al light stretched across the horizon. A line of red and gold painted the dunes, spilling warmth into the cold night. The first rays of dawn fell upon the waiting figures, revealing them more clearly. They were not beasts, not monsters. They were women, tall and slim, with silver hair that shimmered like the sand under morning light. Their eyes glowed faintly, the same glow as the girl. Their faces were sharp, beautiful, alien, and unreadable. Each one carried silence like a cloak, not speaking, not moving, only staring. The girl clung tighter to the man, whispering a word again, this time in broken human tongue. "Sisters," she said, her voice weak but sure. The man froze, his eyes moving from her to them. So these were her kin, her people, the ones who had been watching all through the night. But if they were sisters, why had they stayed back in silence? Why had they not come sooner? The sisters moved at last, slow steps across the sand, their long cloaks brushing against the ground. They circled, forming a wide ring around the human, the girl, and the horse. Their eyes studied him, weighed him, judged him. None of them spoke, their silence heavier than words. The man forced himself to stand, swaying but firm, placing himself between the girl and them. His voice broke as he said, "She would have died." No reply came, no sound, only their glowing eyes fixed on him. The girl pressed her face against his side, clutching his torn coat tighter. One sister finally stepped forward, taller than the rest, her silver hair flowing in the wind. Her hand reached out slowly, touching the man's chest with cold fingers. He flinched, but did not step back. Her eyes narrowed, as if she was feeling his heartbeat, measuring it. Then she pulled her hand away, her lips parting slightly, but no words came, only silence. The other sisters tilted their heads, all staring at him as though he was a puzzle. The man's body shook, but his eyes stayed hard. "You want me gone?" he whispered hoarsely. "But I won't leave her." The girl looked up at him then, eyes wide, her glow flickering stronger, and something shifted in the silence. something unseen but heavy. The sisters stepped back together, their movement like a wave. The circle widened, their eyes never leaving him. The leader raised her hand, pointing toward the rising sun. The man turned his head and saw the horizon painted in fire, but he could not understand what they meant. Were they guiding him, warning him, or testing him? The girl pulled at his sleeve, whispering in her tongue, broken, rushed, desperate. He bent close, listening, though he understood only fragments. But one thing was clear. She feared their judgment, feared what dawn might bring. The man placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "You're safe," he whispered, even as his voice trembled. "You're safe with me." The desert was no longer empty. The silence of the sisters carried weight, heavy and dangerous. The dawn had brought light, but also a new kind of fear. The man knew now his journey was no longer his own. The alien girl's fate was tied to his, and her sisters were the key to both life and death. As the sun climbed higher, the sisters began to move again, slow, graceful, silent. They walked ahead, their leader pausing to look back at him, her glowing eyes unblinking. Then she turned, continuing across the dunes without a word. The girl tugged at his arm, urging him forward. He followed, stumbling, his body weak but his heart unyielding. And with each step, the question burned in his mind. Had he been accepted, or had his trial only just begun? The desert sun rose higher, spilling fire across the dunes. Its light fell on the silent women who now surrounded the man, the horse, and the fragile alien girl. They stood in a perfect ring, unmoving, their eyes glowing faint like hidden stars. Not a word was spoken, not a sound escaped them. Their silence heavier than the desert itself. The man's throat burned, his body weak, but he forced himself to stay upright. Every part of him wanted to fall, but he stood between the sisters and the girl. His knife was gone, lost in the sand, yet his hands clenched into fists. He would not let them take her, not without facing him first. The horse shifted nervously, hooves pressing deep into the sand. The alien girl sat slumped in the saddle, her eyes half closed, her small body still glowing faintly. She whispered something in her tongue, broken and soft. The man leaned closer to hear, and though he did not understand the words, he felt the meaning. Fear. She was afraid of them, even though she had called them sisters. The circle of women closed in slowly, their cloaks brushing the sand, their faces unreadable. The leader stepped forward, taller than the others, her silver hair shining under the morning sun. Her eyes locked on the man, cold and searching. She reached out once more, her fingers brushing against his chest. The man flinched, but did not step back. Her touch was icy, sending a shiver down his spine. It felt as though she was measuring him, weighing his worth with nothing but her hand. The girl stirred weakly, her hand reaching toward the leader, her voice cracked, broken words spilling out. The leader tilted her head, listening, her expression calm but unreadable. Then her glowing eyes flicked back to the man. She stepped away, and with a gesture of her hand, the sisters tightened their circle. The man's chest tightened, his breath quick. Were they here to judge, to punish, or to claim? He raised his voice, hoarse but steady. "She would have died," he said, pointing to the girl. "I gave her my last horse, my last chance." His voice cracked with the weight of truth. Still, silence answered him, thick and suffocating. The sisters only stared, their glowing eyes unblinking. The desert wind howled. Through the circle, carrying sand like whispers, the girl whimpered softly, clutching at the man's torn coat. Her eyes met his, desperate, pleading. The man placed his hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "You're safe," he whispered to her, though his voice trembled. "You're safe with me." The leader raised her hand, and the sisters moved in closer. Their silent steps circled him like predators testing prey. The man turned slowly, his fists clenched, his legs shaking. He knew he could not fight them. Not like this, not with his body broken, but he stood tall all the same, because the girl's life depended on it. One of the sisters stepped forward, smaller than the rest, her eyes softer. She knelt beside the horse and touched the girl's hand. The girl whispered weakly in her alien tongue, and the younger sister's eyes flickered with emotion. For a moment, silence cracked, replaced by something almost human. Compassion. But the leader snapped her gaze toward the younger one, and with a silent command, the compassion vanished. The younger sister stepped back, rejoining the circle without a word. The man felt the weight of their judgment pressing down on him. They were not just deciding the girl's fate, but his. Why had they not killed him already? Why had they not taken her back? The answer came in the way they stared, the way their silence lingered. They were testing him, waiting to see what he would do. His legs gave out suddenly, and he fell to his knees in the sand, gasping. The girl cried weakly, sliding down from the horse to reach for him. She clung to his side, her glowing eyes spilling tears. The sisters watched, unflinching. The man forced himself to lift his head, staring at them through blurred vision. "If it's my life you want, take it," he rasped. "But leave her. She has a right to live." For the first time, the silence broke, a single word, spoken in a visceral voice like music, sharp yet beautiful. "Why?" said the leader, her glowing eyes narrowing. Her voice echoed like a song across the dunes, soft but dangerous. The man's chest heaved as he whispered back, "Because someone must live, even if it's not me." The leader tilted her head, her expression unreadable. The circle shifted, the sisters whispering among themselves in a language he could not understand. The sound was strange, haunting, like wind singing through hollow bones. Then silence returned, heavier than before. The leader raised her hand again, pointing toward the dunes beyond. The man's heart pounded. What did it mean? A trial? A path? A sentence? The girl clung tighter to him, whispering broken words in fear. Her small frame trembled against his side. The man placed his arm around her, pulling her close. "I'll face whatever comes," he said, voice low but sure. "As long as you're not alone." The sisters began to move, their circle opening at last. They walked toward the dunes, silent, graceful, their leader glancing back only once. Her eyes locked on his, cold and deep. Then she turned away, her cloak trailing through the sand. The circle was broken, but the trial had only begun. The man lifted the girl back onto the horse, his legs shaking as he followed the silent women. The desert stretched ahead, but he knew the path was no longer his own. It belonged to them, and to the fate they had chosen for him. The desert path stretched before them, endless and cruel. The sisters walked ahead, silent as stone, their silver hair glowing in the rising sun. Behind them stumbled the man, his body weak, his steps heavy, yet his eyes fixed forward. Beside him the horse carried the alien girl, her small frame wrapped in his torn coat, her glow faint but steady. The man's throat burned with thirst, his lips cracked, but he did not complain. Every time he stumbled, he forced himself up. He would not fall, not here, not while the girl still leaned on him for strength. The sisters did not slow, did not speak, only guided them deeper into the dunes. At last they stopped before a canyon split into the earth, a wound of stone and shadow. The air that rose from it was cold, sharp, carrying a strange hum. The sisters formed a circle once more, their glowing eyes fixed on the man. The leader stepped forward, her cloak dragging across the sand, her expression hard and unreadable. She raised her hand, and for the second time, her voice broke the silence. "Test," she said, her tone like music yet edged with steel. The word echoed through the canyon, chilling the man's bones. The alien girl stirred, her weak voice breaking in protest, words spilling in her tongue. She clutched at the man's arm, shaking her head, her glowing eyes wet with tears. The leader ignored her, her gaze locked on the human. "You gave your horse," she said slowly, her voice halting in human speech. "You gave your chance, for her." The man's chest heaved, his breath ragged. "Yes," he rasped, his voice hoarse. "She deserved to live." The sisters' eyes glowed brighter, a ripple of silent judgment moving through them. The leader lifted her hand again, pointing into the canyon. The darkness there seemed alive, shifting like smoke, humming with strange energy. The man stared, his body trembling, his mind screaming for rest. "What's in there?" he asked, his voice rough. The leader's answer was cold and final. "Truth," she said. "If you are worthy, you live. If not, you end." The alien girl cried out, her small hands gripping his coat, her weak voice breaking into human words. "No," she whispered, her tears glowing faintly. "No go." The man knelt before her, his hand brushing gently across her hair. Her glow trembled under his touch. He smiled faintly, though his body shook with pain. "I must," he whispered. "If I don't, they will take you away." Her tears fell harder, but she nodded weakly. The sisters parted, opening the way into the canyon. The man took one last look at the girl, then stepped into the shadows. The canyon swallowed him whole, silence closing behind. Inside, the air was thick, heavy, the walls glowing faint with strange symbols. Each step echoed, his breath ragged, his heart pounding. The deeper he went, the louder the hum grew, like voices whispering from stone. His vision blurred, his legs buckled, but he forced himself onward. He thought of the girl's eyes, the way she had looked at him, pleading, trusting, that alone drove him deeper. At the canyon's heart, the ground split into a pit of glowing light. Strange energy pulsed upward, burning his skin, tearing into his veins. The whispers grew louder, forming words in his mind. Not human words, not alien words, but something deeper, something inside him. It asked one question again and again. "Why did you give?" The man fell to his knees, gasping. His body shook as the light burned into him, searing his chest. He tried to speak, but no sound came. The question struck him again, louder. "Why did you give?" He forced his lips to move, his voice raw and breaking. "Because life matters," he rasped. "Hers mattered even more than mine." The light flared, wrapping around him, searing every part of his body. His veins glowed, his skin burned, but still he shouted through the pain. "She deserved to live. Someone has to live, even if I don't." The canyon trembled, the voices rising into a roar. His body collapsed, but his spirit clung to the words. The pain grew unbearable, and darkness swallowed him whole. Outside, the alien girl cried in silence, her sisters standing around her, their faces hard. She clutched at the horse's mane, her eyes fixed on the canyon's mouth. The leader's gaze flicked toward her, calm but cold. "His choice decides," she whispered. The girl shook her head, her tears glowing brighter. "He will live," she whispered fiercely, her voice breaking. "He must." The canyon shook, dust falling from its edges. A deep glow rose from within, stronger than before. The sisters stepped back, their eyes narrowing. The girl leaned forward, her heart pounding, her hands shaking. She whispered his name, though she did not know it fully. "Human," she cried softly. "Come back." The ground trembled, the glow rising like fire. And then, at last, a figure stumbled from the canyon. The man, his body weak, his skin marked with faint glowing lines. He collapsed to his knees, gasping, barely alive but still breathing. The girl cried out, sliding down from the horse to reach him. She threw her arms around him, her tears glowing bright against his face. The sisters stood in silence, their glowing eyes fixed on him. The leader tilted her head, her expression unreadable. Then, for the first time, she bowed slightly, not in defeat, but in recognition. The human had faced the canyon, had spoken his truth, and had survived. But the silence that followed carried weight. This was not the end, only the beginning. The man was alive, but forever changed. And the sisters knew, his fate was now bound to theirs, whether he wished it or not. The human lay in the sand, barely breathing. His skin was pale, streaked with sweat and blood, marked with faint glowing lines. His body shook as if caught between worlds, too broken to rise, too stubborn to die. The alien girl knelt beside him, her arms wrapped tightly around his chest. Her tears glowed softly, falling on his face like drops of light. Around them stood the sisters, still and silent, their glowing eyes fixed on the man. They had seen the canyon's light, they had heard its voice, and now they waited. The test had been passed, but the price had been cruel. The human's life now hung by a thread, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The girl looked up at her sisters, her voice trembling. "Help him," she whispered in their language. "He gave everything." The leader stepped forward, slow and graceful, her silver hair shining in the morning sun. She knelt beside the man, her fingers brushing the glowing lines on his skin. A flicker passed through her eyes, not pity, but recognition. "He gave freely," the leader said, her voice soft but firm. "No human we've tested ever crossed the canyon and lived." The girl held the man tighter, her small body glowing with sudden warmth. "He is not like the others," she whispered. "He is ours." The sisters murmured among themselves, voices low, a strange song echoing through the desert. The leader looked down again, placing her hand over the man's chest. Her eyes closed, and the sand around them began to glow. From the earth rose a strange light, pale and blue, like mist rising from forgotten graves. The energy swirled around the man's body, brushing his skin, sinking into his bones. His breathing slowed, his body still shaking, but no longer fading. The girl leaned closer, her forehead touching his. "Stay," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Don't leave me." She placed her hand over the leader's, sharing her own energy. Her small frame trembled as the light poured from her into him. She was giving him what little life she had left, refusing to let him go. The sisters stepped back, watching in silence as the bond formed. The light wrapped around both of them, fusing their energies like threads in a single cloth. The human's fingers twitched, his lips parted, a breath escaping as his body arched. Then stillness returned, heavy and deep. For a long moment nothing moved. Then the human opened his eyes, slow and weak, but alive. His vision was blurred, but the first thing he saw was her face, glowing softly, her eyes wet with tears. "You're still here," he whispered, his voice rough like stone. The girl nodded, her smile faint, but full of light. "I didn't leave," she said softly. "You didn't either." He sat up slowly, every movement a battle. The glowing lines on his skin faded, but something inside him had changed. He could feel it in his chest, in the way the world sounded different now. The wind was no longer just wind. It carried voices, memories, promises. He looked at the girl beside him, and he felt her inside his thoughts. Not words, not pictures, but feelings, deep and real. The bond had formed, unspoken, powerful. He was not just a man anymore, and she was not just a lost girl. They were something new, something shared. The sisters approached again, their circle closing gently around them. The leader stepped forward, kneeling before the man. "You passed the test," she said, her voice low. "You gave without being asked. You loved without knowing. You survived without hate." The man stared at her, confused. "I'm not a hero," he said, shaking his head. "I just didn't want her to die." The leader nodded slowly. "That is why you are worthy." She raised her hand, placing 2 fingers on his forehead. The glow returned, gentle this time, and knowledge slipped into his mind. He saw images of the sisters' past, of their exile, of the bond that once saved their world. And now, in him, that bond had awakened again. The girl stood beside him, her hand in his, her glow stronger than before. The other sisters bowed slightly, their silence no longer cold. The man looked around, still weak, still unsure. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice quiet. The leader stood tall, her eyes calm. "Now you walk with us," she said. "You are part of the old promise, reborn." He nodded, though he did not fully understand. He looked at the girl, and she smiled at him, brighter than the sun above. "I will not leave your side," she said. "Not now, not ever." And somehow he believed her. The desert behind them seemed far away now. The pain, the hunger, the fear. It had led him to something greater. The bond was more than life, more than survival. It was belonging. The man stood slowly, his hand still holding hers. The sisters turned and began to walk. He followed, each step easier than theirs. At last, the girl beside him, the sun above, and a new future waiting just beyond the dunes. He had crossed death and returned. And now the galaxy would never be the same. The morning wind carried silence across the dunes. Not the heavy silence of judgment, but something softer, like peace. The human walked slowly, his steps weak but steady. At his side, the small alien girl kept close, her glowing hands still locked in his. Behind them, the canyon slept again, its test complete. Before them, the sisters walked in formation, leading them across the wide desert. Their silver cloaks fluttered like wings, and the sun glowed off their pale hair like fire. But this time, the man did not fear them. He was no longer just a traveler, no longer just a stranger wandering the sand. Something had changed inside him, a mark not only on his skin, but on his soul. He didn't understand it fully, but he could feel the girl's presence even without looking. Her feelings whispered through the bond. Warmth, trust, and something deeper, something he didn't dare name. They walked until the sand gave way to stone. At the edge of the desert stood a strange structure, carved from the red rock. Ancient symbols glowed faintly on its surface, matching the lines on his skin. The leader of the sisters turned to him, her glowing eyes meeting his. "This is the Hall of Origin," she said, her voice soft but powerful. "Few are ever brought here, only those chosen by the bond." The man looked at the stone walls, feeling the hum of energy inside them. The girl squeezed his hand tighter, as if afraid he might vanish again. "I'm not leaving," he whispered to her, and she nodded, her eyes shining like stars. Inside the hall, light danced along the walls, colors shifting as if alive. Symbols glowed and faded, telling stories he couldn't read but somehow understood. He saw images of old battles, of humans and aliens once standing side by side, of betrayals, of broken peace, and of promises made in blood. The sisters circled around a central platform, the man and the girl stow. Out in the middle, surrounded by glowing stones, the leader stepped forward, holding a strange crown, not a royal piece, but something simpler. It pulsed with the same light as the canyon, the same energy as the bond. She looked at him, her voice clear. "You have passed the test," she said, "but the bond must be sealed." The man frowned, confused. "What does that mean?" he asked, though his voice held no fear. The girl looked up at him, her cheeks pink, her eyes wide. She whispered something in her own tongue, soft and nervous. Then she looked at the leader and nodded. The crown was placed on the man's head, light bursting out in waves. Not painful, not cold, just truth. He saw everything in a single flash. Her memories, her pain, her hunger, her loneliness, her exile from her kind for being weak, for being different. And then, the moment he gave her his horse, the first time anyone had chosen her life over their own. She had belonged to no one, not even her sisters. But when he risked everything for her, something ancient had awakened. The bond was not just a test. It was a calling. One that linked a soul to another, across species, across time, across fear. When the light faded, he fell to one knee, overwhelmed. But the girl knelt with him, her small hand on his heart, and when he looked at her again, he no longer saw a stranger. He saw family. The sisters bowed their heads in silence. The leader stepped back, her face softer than before. "You are one of us now," she said, "not because of blood, but because of choice." The man stood, lifting the girl gently, holding her in his arms. Her glow pulsed warmly against his chest. He looked at the sisters, then back toward the desert that had nearly killed him. "I don't know what lies ahead," he said, "but I won't walk it alone." The sisters turned, leading them out of the hall. The sun was higher now, the sky clear and blue. The sand looked less cruel, the world less empty. He walked forward with the girl in his arms, her head resting on his shoulder. At the edge of the dunes, a new trail stretched into the unknown. The girl stirred, her voice soft. "What now?" she asked, her words small but sure. He smiled, though his lips were dry and his body tired. "Now," he said, "we make something new." They stepped into the light, not as a man and an alien girl, but as two lives forever tied, by choice, by sacrifice, and by a bond born in the dust. And though the future was unknown, he had no doubt that wherever they went, they would never walk alone again.